In 67 BC, the unthinkable happened. A pirate fleet sailed directly into Ostia, the primary port of Rome, and set a consular fleet on fire. The glow of burning ship timber illuminated the coast just miles from the capital, signaling a crisis that threatened to break the most powerful state in the ancient world. The true weapon of these maritime raiders was not the sword, but starvation. Rome had dismantled mighty empires and marched its legions across continents. Yet the Republic was being brought to its knees by a stateless coalition of pirates who successfully choked off the Mediterranean grain supply. As food prices skyrocketed and the Roman people faced imminent famine, the political system found itself paralyzed. Welcome back to World Chronicle. Today, we break down one of the most flawless logistical operations in military history. To save Rome from starvation, the Senate was forced to make a dangerous decision, granting an unprecedented, sweeping command to one man, Pompey the Great. We will analyze the tactical brilliance of his response, detailing how he abandoned standard pursuit tactics, divided the entire Mediterranean into a 13-zone naval dragnet, and deployed 120,000 regular troops to systematically seal off every escape route. This is the exact breakdown of how the Supreme Commander cornered over 10,000 pirates, executed a perfect operational sweep, and eradicated a decades-old maritime empire in exactly 40 days. Rome's absolute dominance on land created a fatal vulnerability at sea. For decades, the Republic focused its military machine on crushing terrestrial rivals, systematically dismantling the established naval powers that had traditionally policed the Mediterranean. The island of Rhodes, once the great maritime enforcer, was economically weakened by Roman trade regulation. Furthermore, the protracted conflicts in the East, particularly the wars against King Mithridates of Pontus, had displaced thousands of skilled sailors and veteran soldiers, leaving them landless and heavily armed. This combination of factors left a massive power vacuum across the wave. The Senate simply did not maintain a standing imperial navy, operating under the flawed assumption that controlling the coastal provinces meant controlling the water. This strategic blind spot allowed a disparate collection of exiles, ruined merchants, and rebel mercenaries to coalesce into a highly organized maritime confederation. The heart of this stateless empire lay in the eastern Mediterranean, specifically along the southern coast of modern-day Turkey in a region known as Cilicia Trachea, or rough Cilicia. The sheer geography provided an impenetrable base of operation. Towering limestone cliffs, jagged reefs, and hidden inlets offered perfect natural harbors for shipyards and arsenals, rendering the coast easily defensible against any conventional legionary assault. From these stone strongholds, the pirates evolved far beyond disorganized bandits. Empowered by the massive influx of wealth from the Mediterranean slave trade, a trade the Roman elite eagerly patronized to supply their vast agricultural estates, these marauders built a sophisticated military infrastructure. They operated a massive armada of up to 1,000 ships. Many of these vessels were formidable warships, equipped with bronze rams, organized into disciplined, coordinated squadrons rather than chaotic raiding parties. By the 70s BC, this maritime insurgency was operating with absolute impunity, treating the open water as their sovereign territory. They did not merely hijack isolated merchant vessels. They sacked over 400 coastal cities and raided deeply entrenched temple sanctuaries across Greece and the Aegean. They also began systematically targeting the very architects of Roman power. Two praetors, complete with their lictors and official insignia, were kidnapped, and prominent patricians were snatched directly from the coastal roads of Italy. In 75 BC, a young Julius Caesar was famously captured and held for ransom by pirates near the island of Pharmacusa. Though he later returned to execute his captors, The initial kidnapping demonstrated their total disregard for the prestige of the Roman name. The Mediterranean was no longer a secure transit route. It was a hostile theater where the survival of the Republic's economy was dictated entirely by pirate fleet commanders. The pirates had built a shadow empire on the water, but their brazen blockade of the Roman grain supply finally broke the political deadlock in the capital, forcing the Roman Senate into a desperate decision that would solve the immediate survival crisis but permanently damage the foundation of the Republic. The reality of famine finally shattered the complacency of the Roman political machine. In the markets of the capital, the price of imported wheat had skyrocketed beyond the reach of the average citizen, and the grain doles that kept the urban population docile were running dry. The angry, starving plebeian mob threatened to tear the city apart from the inside, shifting the pirate crisis from a distant provincial nuisance to an immediate existential threat. Recognizing that decades of uncoordinated naval campaigns and underfunded coastal defenses had utterly failed, a tribune named Lex Gabinia stepped forward to bypass the traditional legislative gridlock. He introduced a radical piece of legislation that would fundamentally alter the constitutional balance of the Republic, the Lex Gabinia. This proposal did not merely seek to raise another temporary fleet. It demanded the creation of a centralized, supreme military command, and Gabinius argued that only one man possessed the strategic capacity to wield it: Pompey the Great. The terms outlined in the Lex Gabinia were legally staggering and territorially unprecedented. Pompey was to be granted absolute imperium over the entire Mediterranean Sea and command over every coastline up to 50 miles inland. This massive jurisdiction crossed multiple borders and effectively overrode the authority of established provincial governors, placing the harbors, fortresses, and supply lines of the entire Roman world under his direct control for a period of 3 years. For the conservative elite within the Senate, this legislative maneuver was terrifying. Prominent patricians fiercely opposed the law, arguing that granting any single general such unchecked, super-provincial authority would inevitably birth a new tyrant. The political establishment understood that concentrating military resources and legionary loyalty in the hands of one man was a direct threat to the Republic's traditional power structure. Yet, theoretical constitutional fears held no weight against the literal hunger of the Roman underclass. Driven by desperation, the popular assembly forcefully passed the law, overriding senatorial objections and handing Pompey a logistical blank check of unimaginable scale. The supreme commander was authorized to tap directly into the state treasury, mobilizing an overwhelming force of 500 warships, 120,000 heavily armed legionaries, and 5,000 cavalry. The mere news of this legislative victory and Pompey's appointment caused the exorbitant price of grain in Rome to collapse on the very same day, reflecting the absolute faith the public placed in his military reputation. Pompey immediately began organizing the largest, most synchronized naval deployment the ancient world had ever seen. Pompey now held more power than any Roman before him, but all the ships and legions in the world meant nothing if he could not find an enemy that could simply vanish into the open sea. The traditional Roman response to maritime raiding had always been entirely reactive. Previous commanders would launch isolated pursuit squadrons to chase individual pirate fleets across open water, a method that inevitably failed because the pirates could easily outmaneuver heavy Roman galleys or simply retreat into hidden coves until the legions lost interest. Pompey recognized that treating the pirates as a conventional naval opponent was a fatal tactical error. He understood that he did not need to outrun the enemy. He needed to deny them the use of the sea itself. To achieve this, he fundamentally rewrote Roman grand strategy, conceptualizing the immense expanse of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea not as an uncontrollable void, but as a rigid, manageable grid. Leveraging his unprecedented imperium, Pompey mathematically divided the entire maritime theater into 13 distinct geographic zones. He appointed 24 legates, trusted sub-commanders drawn directly from the senatorial elite to take absolute control of these sectors simultaneously. Each legate was issued a specific detachment of ships, regular infantry, and cavalry, with strict orders to lock down their designated coastal choke points, supply harbors, and vital transit routes like the Strait of Messina. The operational logic of this plan lay in strict synchronization rather than aggressive pursuit. By occupying the strategic bottlenecks and controlling the prevailing wind patterns along the coasts, the Roman detachments systematically stripped the pirates of their greatest asset, mobility. If a pirate squadron managed to evade capture and flee from one geographic sector, they were not chased. They simply sailed directly into the heavily guarded perimeter of a fresh Roman fleet in the neighboring zone. This was an industrialized war machine operating on a logistical scale that defied ancient convention. When the campaign officially commenced, the synchronization was absolute. The sheer volume of thousands of heavy oars striking the water simultaneously across dozens of Allied ports signaled the launch of hundreds of Roman galleys, moving in disciplined formation across the sea. Pompey did not personally lead this initial sweep. Instead, he stationed himself with a mobile reserve force, acting as the supreme field commander directing the broader strategic flow. His operational objective was highly calculated. He instructed his Western legates to systematically flush the maritime insurgents out of their entrenched safe havens in Spain, Gaul, North Africa, and Italy, permanently sealing off every captured harbor to deny them any chance of return. As the Roman dragnet methodically advanced, the pirates found themselves locked out of the illicit markets, hidden inlets, and supply lines that had sustained their shadow economy for half a century. They were being systematically herded eastward, compressed into an ever-shrinking theater of operation that offered no refuge. The strategy of the net eliminated the open ocean as a sanctuary, effectively turning the rugged geography of the Mediterranean against the very men who had once mastered it. The trap was perfectly laid, and the 13 jaws of Pompey's war machine slammed shut, beginning a countdown that would shock the ancient world. The execution of Pompey's grand strategy was ruthlessly efficient. Across the western Mediterranean, the synchronized advance of the Roman detachments systematically shattered the pirates' operational capacity. Under the command of senatorial legates, regular troops and heavy galleys simultaneously descended upon the coastlines of Spain, Gaul, North Africa, and the Italian peninsula. The maritime insurgents were psychologically unprepared for this level of organized, systemic pressure. They expected the traditional Roman response, a lumbering, isolated pursuit force that could be easily outmaneuvered on the open water. Instead, they faced a synchronized, industrialized eviction. Whenever a pirate squadron attempted to dock for fresh water or seek refuge in a previously secure cove, they found Roman infantry already holding the shoreline, their interlocked shields forming an impenetrable wall against the sea. This rapid clearance immediately unblocked the vital trade arteries of the Republic. The critical maritime corridors around Sicily, Sardinia, and the North African coast, the primary grain routes of the ancient world, were violently wrested back into Roman control. The direct consequence of this tactical success was felt almost instantly in the capital. Hundreds of massive transport ships, previously trapped in Allied ports by the fear of hijacking, were finally given an armed escort to sail. When the first convoys of heavy grain freighters dropped anchor at Ostia, the economic panic in Rome evaporated. The exorbitant price of wheat plummeted to pre-crisis levels on the very same day, effectively diffusing the threat of mass starvation and securing the absolute loyalty of the plebeian mob for the supreme commander. The logistical speed of the Roman advance redefined the capabilities of ancient warfare. The entire western half of the Mediterranean Sea, a massive geographical expanse that had been plagued by unchecked raiding for over half a century, was completely pacified in exactly 40 days. Pompey's dragnet functioned flawlessly precisely because his subcommanders maintained absolute discipline within their assigned geographic grid. Once a sector was cleared of hostile ships, the Roman naval patrols did not stand down. They remained in continuous rotation, holding the line to deny any possibility of a pirate counter-infiltration. Cut off from their western supply lines, illicit slave markets, and hidden anchorages, the surviving pirate squadrons realized that the waters around Italy had become a vast death trap. They were systematically herded eastward, forced into a desperate, chaotic migration toward their ancestral stronghold. Rome was fed, and the western waters were secure, but the core of the pirate armada had retreated to their impenetrable fortresses in the east, preparing for a final desperate stand. While his legates maintained the impenetrable blockade across the west, Pompey took direct tactical control of the decisive eastern offensive. Leaving the pacified zones in the hands of his subordinates, he mobilized a specialized strike force of his 60 heaviest, most elite warships and sailed directly for the heart of the maritime insurgency, the jagged, unforgiving coastline of Cilicia Trachea. This region, historically known as Rough Cilicia, was an operational nightmare of towering limestone cliffs, treacherous reefs, and hidden inlets that severely restricted wide naval maneuver. Pompey understood that the geography here heavily favored the defenders, but it also forced a necessary concentration of force. The scattered, fleeing pirate squadrons had finally realized that the Mediterranean was closed to them. With no remaining safe harbors in the west, they consolidated into a single, massive armada, dropping anchor near the heavily fortified promontory of Coracesium. For the first time in the entire campaign, the insurgents stopped running. Driven by absolute desperation, they formed a unified battle line to face the supreme commander head-on, banking their survival on the hope that their superior numbers and intimate knowledge of the coastal currents could break the Roman advance. The ensuing Battle of Coracesium was not a chaotic skirmish, but a brutal, mathematically calculated collision of two maritime powers. The pirate confederacy advanced with aggressive speed, attempting to leverage their lighter, highly maneuverable vessels to outflank the Roman line and ram the heavy galleys. However, Pompey had anticipated this and refused to engage in a traditional war of maneuver. He relied instead on Roman engineering and the unshakable discipline of his regular troops. As the insurgent ships closed into striking distance, the Roman decks erupted with heavy, synchronized suppressing fire. Ship-mounted ballistae launched lethal volleys of heavy bolts, systematically stripping the pirate vessels of their rowers and entirely disrupting their attack vector. Then, rather than exchanging glancing blows, the Roman crews deployed massive iron grappling hook. These heavy iron claws bit deep into the timber of the enemy ships, violently locking the vessels together amidst the grinding, percussive crunch of splintering hulls. By tethering the ships together, Pompey effectively eliminated the pirates' single greatest advantage, their mobility, and fundamentally transformed a fluid naval engagement into a static, brutal infantry brawl. This was the exact tactical environment where the Republic held absolute, uncontested supremacy. Heavily armored Roman Marines, highly trained in close-quarters cohort tactics, poured across the gangways with interlocked shields and drawn gladia. The disorganized maritime raiders, accustomed to terrifying poorly armed merchant crews or sacking lightly garrisoned coastal towns, were suddenly trapped in a confined space against regular heavy infantry. The legionaries systematically cleared the decks, stepping over the fallen to sever the pirate command structure ship by ship. Without a unified admiral to signal a coordinated retreat or adjust the defensive line, the insurgent formation rapidly disintegrated under the methodical Roman assault. The tactical dismantling was absolute. Dozens of pirate vessels were sunk beneath the waves, while hundreds more were captured intact, permanently destroying the operational capacity of the Shadow Empire's navy. Stripped of their warships and facing total encirclement by the Roman galleys now controlling the bay, the surviving maritime forces broke their lines and fled toward the shoreline in total panic. They abandoned their ruined armada and scrambled up the steep, rocky inclines toward the heavy land fortifications overlooking the coast, hoping that the sheer elevation of the citadel would deter a Roman pursuit. The pirate fleet was annihilated, and nearly 10,000 survivors retreated behind the stone walls of their mountain fortresses, awaiting the inevitable Roman slaughter. Safe behind the towering limestone walls of Coracesium and neighboring citadels like Kragos, the surviving maritime insurgents believed the sheer elevation of their mountain fortresses would deter a Roman ground assault. They fundamentally miscalculated the nature of their enemy. Pompey the Great did not merely command a fleet. He was a master of terrestrial warfare, leading veteran legions accustomed to breaking heavily fortified cities. Disembarking his heavy infantry, he immediately transitioned the campaign from a fluid naval pursuit into the brutal, mathematical certainty of a Roman siege. Legionaries began digging extensive circumvallation trenches and assembling heavy siege engines, systematically severing all landward trails and supply roads. The rhythmic, percussive thud of Roman engineers driving timber palisades into the rocky soil echoed up the cliffs, signaling the construction of a perimeter that no one would cross. This operational shift created an absolute logistical stranglehold. For decades, the pirates had relied on the sea as an infinite supply line and an instant avenue of escape. Now, trapped within their own citadels, the vast wealth of looted gold and silver hoarded in their treasuries was completely useless. They could not buy grain, and they faced the grim reality of an impending localized famine. There were no reinforcements coming, no hidden squadrons left to break the naval blockade in the bay below, and no allied kingdoms willing to risk the wrath of the supreme commander. The psychological pressure mounted exponentially as the insurgents watched the Roman war machine operate with cold, industrialized efficiency. Furthermore, they were acutely aware of Pompey's reputation. His previous campaigns in Italy and Spain had proven that he could be utterly merciless against armed rebellion. Standard Roman military doctrine dictated that if a garrison forced a prolonged siege and the walls were eventually breached by force, the defenders forfeited any right to mercy, resulting in total annihilation and mass enslavement. Facing the mathematical inevitability of starvation or a violent legionary assault, the psychological resolve of the pirate confederation completely collapsed. They recognized that Pompey possessed effectively infinite resources, uncontested maritime dominance, and no intention of abandoning the campaign. Before the first Roman battering ram could even strike the stone gates of Coracesium, the defenders threw down their weapons and offered their unconditional surrender. Across the rugged coastline of rough Cilicia, fortress after fortress capitulated without attempting a final stand, delivering the last remnants of the Shadow Empire directly into Roman custody. According to Roman tradition, 10,000 captured pirates meant 10,000 crosses lining the coastal roads. But Pompey was about to make a decision that would redefine Roman grand strategy. The immediate aftermath of the capitulation yielded a staggering logistical haul for the Republic. Roman quartermasters recorded the capture of over 400 fully intact warships, while legionaries systematically torched the massive timber arsenals and shipyards hidden within the coves of rough Cilicia. The heavy smoke of burning pirate fleets signaled the absolute end of their maritime supremacy. Yet, the most pressing tactical issue was the fate of the 10,000 insurgents now held under armed guard. Standard Roman military doctrine, fiercely upheld by the conservative Senate, demanded absolute annihilation for armed rebellion. Just 4 years earlier, The Republic had lined the Appian Way with the crucified bodies of Spartacus's followers as a brutal deterrent against defiance. The captured pirates fully expected to share this agonizing fate along the rocky shores of the eastern Mediterranean. Instead, operating under the total supra-provincial imperium granted by the Lex Gabinia, Pompey the Great executed a masterstroke of political pragmatism. He pardoned them. This unprecedented decree of clemency was not born from modern concepts of human rights or innate mercy. It was a cold, highly calculated strategy of imperial stabilization. Pompey recognized the structural root of the crisis. Decades of relentless terrestrial warfare, punitive taxation, and the shifting borders of the Mithridatic campaigns had displaced thousands of men across the east, stripping them of their land and livelihood. They had turned to the sea not out of inherent malice, but out of desperate armed necessity. Pompey understood that ordering a mass execution would only drive any remaining undetected pirate squadrons into a protracted, fanatical guerrilla insurgency. By offering a pardon, he severed the insurgency at its psychological root, mathematically ensuring that the surviving raiders had a vested interest in the peace of the Roman order rather than its destruction. To finalize this pacification, the Supreme Commander implemented a massive, forced demographic shift. He systematically relocated the pardoned insurgents away from the coastal fortifications and the sea that had empowered them, marching them deep into the depopulated, agrarian interiors of Cilicia and Achaia. There, the former raiders were granted plots of fertile land to cultivate. The ruined Hellenistic city of Soli was entirely rebuilt and populated with these new farmers, pointedly renamed Pompeiopolis as a lasting monument to his victory. Through this logistical relocation, Pompey achieved an operational miracle. He instantly transformed 10,000 hostile, stateless combatants into productive, tax-paying agricultural laborers. More importantly, in the complex web of Roman politics, these men were now legally bound as clients to Pompey, cementing a massive base of personal loyalty in the East that terrified the conservative establishment back in the capital. The Senate's traditional reliance on brute force had allowed the maritime crisis to fester and choke the Republic for decades. Pompey's pragmatic statesmanship, combining overwhelming, synchronized military force with strategic resettlement, permanently dismantled the shadow empire of the sea. The pacification of the Mediterranean was absolute. A sprawling, 13-zone theater of war that had choked the Roman economy for half a century was completely secured in just 89 days. Pompey the Great had spent exactly 40 days sweeping the western provinces and 49 days systematically dismantling the eastern stronghold. With the pirate arsenals reduced to ash and their harbors permanently garrisoned by regular troops, the sea was fundamentally transformed from a hostile frontier into Mare Nostrum, our sea. For the first time in generations, heavy grain freighters could sail from Alexandria to Ostia without armed escort, fully securing the Republic's food supply. The sheer logistical perfection of this rapid blitz propelled Pompey to an unprecedented level of political prestige. Riding this wave of popular adulation, he easily bypassed the conservative establishment once again to secure the Lex Manilia in 66 BC, granting him another massive mandate to finally crush King Mithridates in the east. Yet, while the maritime crisis was permanently solved, the constitutional foundation of the Roman Republic had suffered a fatal fracture. The Lex Gabinia had proven a terrifying political truth. The traditional, slow-moving legislative machinery of the Senate was utterly obsolete in the face of a true imperial emergency, and granting supra-provincial imperium to a single strongman was incredibly effective. By handing Pompey unchecked authority over the entire Mediterranean basin and its massive military resources, the Roman populace had bypassed centuries of carefully balanced constitutional safeguard. This legislation created the exact legal framework that would soon dismantle the state. The political elite now understood that whoever controlled the logistics, the legions, and the grain supply could dictate terms to the imperial government. This was the operational blueprint that a younger, highly ambitious patrician, Julius Caesar, would study, adopt, and eventually perfect. Pompey had achieved the impossible. He turned an unmanageable ocean into a secure Roman lake and saved the capital from starvation, all without resorting to the mass executions that traditionally defined his era. His meticulously synchronized dragnet remains a masterpiece of ancient grand strategy. However, the true historical legacy of the campaign of 67 BC was not merely the eradication of 10,000 maritime insurgents. It was the dangerous normalization of absolute individual power. In their desperation to survive the famine, the people of Rome had eagerly handed the vast military machinery of the state to one supreme commander. Decades later, that exact concentration of military power would cross the Rubicon, plunging Rome into the civil wars that would ultimately forge an autocratic empire. Subscribe to our channel to relive the great chapters of history together.